We're delighted to be joined by Tim Gurner, founder of his eponymous development company, Gurner. For those that aren't familiar, Gurner has become a name quite synonymous with development and bold development, striking development across the country, but particularly here in Brisbane and his hometown of Melbourne. Since launching in 2013, his business has truly exploded to include a development pipeline that now includes 19 buildings, 5,500 apartments, and an end value of $3.8 billion. And for the record, Tim hasn't even celebrated his 40th birthday. It's an extraordinary achievement. We're honoured to have you here today. Would you please welcome Tim?
Just for the record, nowhere near 40. Just want to put it out there.
So we're going to have a chat. We're going to keep it pretty casual. Tim, we've got about 35, 40 minutes. So I want to cover a little bit of ground. Probably the place where I'd like to start and something I'd like to understand is, when you were a young kid, did you always know you wanted to be a builder?
It's a good question. I actually, when I was at school, I remember Mum and Dad were building a tennis court. We lived in Kangaroo Ground, which is about 20k out of the CBD. And I played sick for 2 weeks straight, and my mum and dad actually let me believe it, so I could sit there and watch the trucks create the pools and the tennis court. And I think it was always in my blood. My dad was an engineer, and I've always just had an incredible passion for design, marketing, and property.
And so how did you get started? What was your sort of journey from a young kid interested in tennis courts to Gurner today? Take us there.
Yeah, look, I started at commerce at Melbourne Uni, and I did my first 2 years, and I was absolutely bored out of my brain. I did my last year over 2 years and worked with a real estate agent called Tony Pride, who's a big agent in Melbourne. And the theory there was I wanted to get in the game. I had no connections, didn't know what I was doing, I had no money, and he was doing quite a bit of property development on side of real estate at the time, and he was an incredible mentor to me. Like, I've been lucky, I've had two really important mentors, and Tony really taught me how to sell and what people wanted. So how do we actually achieve what you want as a buyer, and how we actually get that to you as a seller? And he was really important in that milestone. And it's interesting, one day I was sitting, like everyone when you're 21, whinging to my hippie housemate that I wasn't enjoying work very much, and this chick was a full-blown hippie, and she said to me, "I don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. If you don't love it, why are you doing it?" And she said, "Oh, what do you love?" And I said, "Oh, look, I really like going to the gym, and I want to have my own business. I don't want a boss. I hate having a boss." And she said, "Oh, you should start a gym." I said, "Oh, well, you can't just go and start a gym." She said, "Yes, you can. Why can't you?" And 3 weeks later, literally to the day, I signed a lease in Elwood, started the fit out myself, realised halfway through you had to have a personal training licence, which I didn't have, so I went and did that by correspondence while I was still studying commerce. I then realised I had to have a permit for the gym, which I went and did that. So along the way, it was a very good learning curve. And that, although it wasn't a property play, it actually was, because it was an opportunity in the middle of Elwood, which is your sort of very cool, hip area in Melbourne. And there was an empty shell that had been sitting there for a long time, and I just saw that as a really good property play. And so we took that, grew the business, and I sold it a couple of years later. But it was a really important part of my life, because the 3 months in, firstly, I'd borrowed money. I didn't have any money at the time. I borrowed money from my grandfather, about 34 grand, and at 10% interest, which was nice of him, and borrowed the rest from National Australia Bank. So I had a lot of pressure on myself. 3 months in, my dad passed away, and then I actually lost 3 grandparents in the space of 3 months. And that was a really defining point for me in my life. It was incredibly hard. Many, many days I wanted to give up, as you can imagine, and it sort of set the parameters of where we've got to today, because I had the choice of giving up and going under because I didn't have any money to pay back the bank. I had a 150 grand loan with NAB. And so I decided I had to get back in there and just have an absolute crack. And so for 2 years, I worked 6 in the morning till 10:30 at night, 7 days a week, built up the business and then sold it, and then got back into what I wanted to do. So I got to FKP next, which I absolutely hated, if there's any FKP people in the world. I am not suited.
Sure, there are.
Yeah, I am not suited to public companies. That's for damn sure. And about 9 months in, I approached a guy called Mori, who you know, Adam, he's a real oracle of property in Melbourne, very important influencer of mine over the years, and a very close friend. He, at the time, was doing 401 St Kilda Road, which was the first sort of big empty nester product in Melbourne. He was also doing a Beckett Tower, we bought a Beckett Tower. He was doing Mackenzie Tower and Lacrosse. I had a coffee with him and literally started the next day. And Mori was incredibly important to me because not that he's a good businessman, because he's probably the total opposite, and I'd say that if he was sitting here, but he taught me what not to do, but also how to create a brand. Mori's definitely the best brand creator I've ever met, and that's a big part of what I learned with him.
And so your approach to Mori, I understand, was somewhat unique. Do you want to just talk us through how you did go about approaching him?
Yeah, look, Mori'd never employed anyone before. He was he was the old cowboy developer, did it himself, and if it wasn't going to hurt by more than 100 grand, he didn't really care about it. So I approached him, I literally called him and said, I want to have a coffee, I think you're amazing. Sat down with him and told him, I'll work for you for whatever you want. You don't have to pay me, do whatever you want. And I literally started the next day. I think he could see the passion I had to be with him. I wanted to learn from him. And within 6 months within 3 months I had 5% of the business, within 6 months I had 33% of the business. So, and then together we did Pan-Urban, we did a Beckett Tower, 401 St Kilda Road, a Beckett, and then the day that Lehman Brothers fell over, when everyone else was running scared, we stupidly put a hand up at an auction in Mackenzie Street. And it was the start of when the Asian developers were coming to Melbourne. So they weren't there yet, but we had a feeling they were coming. We thought this piece of land was worth about $18 million. No one else wanted to touch it because it was a stupid idea. And we paid 10.2 for it. 8 months later, we flipped it for 22 million to Chitman Singh, which was the first sort of Malaysian purchase in Melbourne. And that gave me an opportunity to do something different. It was the first time I'd had a decent amount of money to actually do something. And Mori wanted to continue, in the middle of the GFC, Mori wanted to continue building massive towers, even though the banks had closed the doors. So I started a little business called Urbanity. With Urbanity, we did about 25 projects. So we've literally just finished the last one now. And the theory was all inner city Melbourne, all the hip culture. So, West Melbourne, St Kilda, Elwood, Collingwood, Fitzroy, etc. Really, really good. Good product and great business, but I wasn't really excited to get out of bed.
Just to go back, you don't actually know this, but Mori told me before that Tim Gurner didn't work for Mori. Mori worked for Tim Gurner, which was an interesting perspective because he really shut me down in when I asked the question. But it obviously gives us a bit of a sense as to who you are and the way that you go about this. I mean, through that journey, you were learning from the gym, not knowing what to do, all the way through to probably today absorbing information. I mean, what is it about, I guess, your ability to learn quickly that's informing the way that you're growing your business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think probably my best skill set is I don't forget. So I'll never ever make a mistake twice, and I made heaps of them. It's just that I will never do it again. So I'm really, really lucky that I absolutely love what I do. It's a really unique place. I live, sleep, dream, holiday, property, design, marketing, branding, numbers. Every element of what we do, I feel incredibly lucky that I'd do it for nothing. I don't do it, I'm not doing FV to make the money. It's not about that. It's about creating something really special. And so for me, it's absolute passion and drive. And as you know, if you like every single successful people in the world, it is fucking hard what we do. Sorry, I don't know if I'll swear. It is brutally hard having your own business in any form, whether it's a coffee shop, whether it's, a website, whatever it is. So if you're not outrageously passionate about what you want to do and you want to jump out of bed in the morning and do it, then it's not going to be successful.
Along the way, as you're sort of building up the business and building up the pipeline of projects, presumably from a cash flow point of view, you were doubling down on the opportunities. Is that right? You're sort of taking larger punts as you went through. I mean, FV, for example, can you tell us about how you came to sort of create that opportunity? For those that don't know, FV's here in the Valley. It's Tim's sort of pride and joy here in Brisbane and an incredible achievement, something that I can very honestly say it was a site that many, many people looked at, didn't want to touch it. You came in with a fresh set of eyes, a new vision, and created something pretty amazing. Tell us about the FV journey.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing, people speak to me all the time about the punt and property development's risky. I actually don't agree at all, to be honest. I look at our business like a retail business. So we have a retail product. So if you're a restaurateur and you're selling hamburgers. Every single night you've got to throw the hamburger out. I've got an asset and a retail product that never goes off. So I buy a piece of land. You know, luckily for most developers in the last 15 years, whether you were good, bad or indifferent, your land doubled in 2 to 3 years anyway. So you didn't actually have to be that good anyway. Unfortunately for me, like I was laughing when you told me before, I haven't had the opportunity of many flips that have done that. Mackenzie Street's the only one. I deliver every one of our projects. So Brisbane's an interesting one. Like I had a lot on in Melbourne at the time, and I said to a very close, one of my partners, not partners, but selling partners, where should we be? And he said, oh, you should come and have a look at Brisbane. There's not a huge amount going on. This is just after the floods, and it was pretty dead. My first trip up to Brisbane, literally it was my first trip. Drove around. I wanted to, first did a fair bit of research. I really wanted to be South Brisbane or Fortitude Valley, that was it. South Brisbane, probably not so much now because it's more established, but when it was less established. And Fortitude. So we drove to Fortitude, saw this big triangle sign, said developer terms available. I thought, here we go, you beauty, this is me. So that was a good opportunity. By the end of the day, on my first day to Brisbane, I'd made an offer on the property, so I hadn't even got back to Melbourne yet. I'd made an offer subject to DD because I knew that it had to connect to Brunswick Street, which it didn't. I then went and did 2 deals over the next 6 months with the guys next door and combined the entire triangle site to 5,000 metres. What that did is the first site was 2930, which allowed 20 stories. Getting to 5,000 allowed 30 stories, so I had a pretty good competitive advantage. And luckily for me, I mean, I was obviously the laughing stock of Brisbane, I probably still am, to do that site. As you said, everyone else looked at it and thought it was mad, but luckily for me, I saw the fundamentals of what it was. I don't listen to the white noise, or I don't listen to what anyone says, really, to be totally honest, particularly the media, apart from you guys, of course. And for me, the site so for me, our business is based on regentification, right? So all of our sites everywhere across Australia, within 1 to 3K of the CBD, old industrial areas that are taking off. I don't want to be in an established South Yarra or South Brisbane when it's already established because my investors aren't going to see that jump. So I saw Fortitude Valley. That was the old retail precinct of Brisbane. It was the hub. 50,000 people there every Friday, Saturday night. 76% of the demographic between 25 and 40. Retail, cafe, restaurant hub. Obviously, Alfred Street I could see it was changing. It was going to continue to change. 400 metres to the CBD and 50 metres to the train station. To me, it was an absolute no-brainer. Now, when I say no-brainer, there was 500 times that I was shaking in bed at sleep at night, not knowing what to do. And I can tell you, you can ask Mori, I called him many times and said, fuck, what do I do? This is a really terrifying thought. Going to a different state, doing the biggest development we've ever done. And so many times he got me on the phone and said, you are the bloody best, get out there and do it, stop fucking around and just get it done. And if it wasn't for him, I definitely wouldn't have done it. I knew that it had to be something big. If it was 100 apartments, it wouldn't have changed the area. So we had 1,000. It was meant to be planned out over three stages over 10 years. We launched the first building, 365. We actually sold 240 on the first night. And I thought, this is not bad. We did another 50 the next day and we're almost sold out. So then we bought on the second tower. That sold out even quicker. It was about 5 weeks to fully unconditional. And then we didn't even have the third building design. We rushed that through. 3 months later, we launched that and sold out as well. So 992 apartments sold out.
It's an incredible story. I mean, we were exchanging text messages last night and I made the point that when we started The Urban Developer was roughly about the same time that Tim started FV, and we've kind of sort of mapped our journeys together, and it's been extraordinary to watch you do what you do, to sort of reset the expectations of what it is to sort of think big about this city, and then at the same time pull it off. Because someone that's in the game, I truly understand that there were so many moving parts. Everything was high octane in terms of both risk, the sizzle, the delivery, the pricing, the settlements. It was all there. You've done it. What's next in Brizzy for you?
Look, it's a good question. I think the market's at an interesting point. I haven't bought anything up here for 2 years because I think if there's anything that's overvalued in Australia, it's definitely development site prices. I think they're totally outrageous. I think Brisbane's site prices, when I bought here, I bought at $12,000 a unit. It got to about 50 pretty quickly, which felt probably about right. 50 to 60 felt about right. Then I had a fighting war at 109 Melbourne Street with Forrester, where we took it up to 75,000 a unit site. Then it went to 80, 90, 100, all within a year, which is just total insanity and made no sense at all. So we pulled the pin. We didn't look here for about 2 years. I obviously bought the site next door, which we've got a permit for 200 apartments on. Prices are now back to probably 50, 60,000 a unit site. It needs to come back to 30 to 40, I think, for it to look like value again. I think with all the markets, I think the biggest hurt in the next 3 years is going to be development site prices. I think, as someone was saying earlier, people don't understand how brutal finance is at the moment. Finance for developers right now is as hard as I've ever seen it. Forget about the GFC, that was a walk in the park. Right now, luckily for me, ANZ as an example, they've picked 5 developers in Australia they're backing and they're throwing everything they can at it. I've got $500 million with ANZ. They've just approved the best deal I've ever done in Albert Place. But there's 500 other developers that are getting absolutely nothing. And where I see that's going to hurt is land, people that have bought a 40, 50, 60, 70, $5 million piece of land expecting to get 50, 60%, they're going to get zero and there's going to be real hurt.
What's influencing the market beyond that in terms of the actual buyer demand, in your opinion?
Yeah, GBM is what I say. Government, banks and the media. So the government are doing everything they can to possibly fuck it up. I've never seen such stupidity, to be honest, in my life. It's, you've got...
I'm sure we've got some government representatives here today.
Yeah. I'm happy
this does not represent the the opinion of the urban developer.
Right. I'm happy to talk
That's
to them.
all right. I gave him carte blanche anyway, so go for it.
I'm happy to talk to them anytime because they're going to make a mess of it and it's a real problem. I mean, you've got, all this talk about negative gearing. Just stop the talk, do something. The talk is more damaging than the actual result. I mean, they're not going to come in and stop it. They might do something on second, third properties, but stop talking about it, do something. You've got foreign taxes. Our foreigners, people say our foreigners are pushing up the prices. It's such a simplistic view of the world. It's just not true. Our market is dictated by supply and demand. It's a really simple equation. We build more than what we need and prices will come down. We build less than what we need, prices are going to go up. We've got 350,000 people coming to Australia every year, 127,700 to Melbourne, 116,000 to Sydney, 90,000 to Queensland. These are very, very big numbers. And talking about comparisons to Italy, Italy's migration has gone down for 30 years. Japan's gone negative by 5% every single year. That's why their property prices are dropping. So you can't compare us to these other worlds. Our migration is just huge. So, we in Melbourne, for example, 48% of state revenue is property related. Sydney's 47%. I think you guys are 43, 44. So property is the driver of the Australian economy. And since the stamp duty exemptions came in July 1, hasn't slowed, it has stopped, literally stopped in Melbourne. Rental vacancy at under 1.5% in Melbourne and Sydney. Inner city, Brisbane's under 2.3%. People say, geez, headline, it's gone from 2.3 to 2.5%. What the hell does that? That doesn't mean anything. Worry about it when it gets to 15%. Anything under 5% is a very, very good, stable market. And you've got to remember, if you've got vacancy of 2.3% in a new apartment, you're talking about a week, 1 week a year. That's someone getting out of the property, getting cleaned and being relet. And we've got 650 apartments about to hit the letting market now. We haven't even started our campaign and we've got 75 tenants in there as of last night. It was the first day we opened. So I don't listen to any of the white noise from government. I mean, the media, that Four Corners thing was the most atrocious thing I've ever seen in my life. They take you out to a mining town 15 kilometres out of Perth and say this is representative of the Australian market. It's dropped 25%. Well, if you buy next to a mining town and there's one source of income, that's what's going to happen.
So you talk about the media. I mean, most people are aware of the whole Smash Davo 60 Minutes affair. What happened there? Was it... how did that affect you?
Look, I'm glad I had a holiday booked straight after it, is all I can say. It was one of the hardest tests of my life, to be honest. It was absolutely brutal and has changed every way we do media moving forward. I got asked to do a 40 minutes piece with Triggerboff and Turnbull. I'm not going to say no to that. Triggerboff's my idol, apart from his product is obviously not my idol, but he is my idol. And I said yes. So we did a 4.5-hour interview. The interview was about property market. Went to my display suites, completed buildings, all sorts of stuff. Talked about, he asked one question about millennials and said, where do you see the market going? I said, look, it's a privilege to own property in Australia. It's not a God-given right. I think we've got this expectation that people just get to own property. And I said, you can't travel overseas, lease a BMW, out every night, drink four coffees a day and smashed avocados and expect to buy a property, and they cut everything else out and just did that. It was unbelievably brutal. So the first day, it was all positive press. Second day, that idiot from the Herald Sun, Susie O'Brien, called me a gold-rolled wanker, which was...
That's actually a pretty good burn.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yep.
And then 2 days after, she said, let's put it behind us and let's do a profile piece. I wanted to kill her. But it was really interesting. So after that, it just went absolutely bananas. We had over 1,000 media requests within 24 hours, and it affected me a lot. I got really sick from it, and it was horrible. I mean, we had media outside my house, we had media outside the office, and the interesting thing, it got picked up all around the world, the US and Europe, and really interesting in America because they thought I was totally insane because avocado on toast cost $4. So they were trying to do the numbers on $4, and they all thought I was mad. So, but yeah, it's still going. I don't regret any of it at all. It is a major issue. It's a real issue. The millennial generation, there's no question, they have expectations beyond what's real. I employ a lot of them.
Do you know the Batuta Advocate guys wrote a satirical article about you? Actually, I sent it to you, and I don't think you realised it was satirical. And so it was about, I can't exactly remember the exact wording, but it was hilarious. I've got to send it to you again. But it's an open invitation. If you'd like to get roasted tomorrow by the Batuta Advocate guys, I'm more than happy to facilitate that at the lunch.
Yeah, no.
All right, thought I'd try anyway. Now, we're here at this conference to tackle sort of the decade of urban disruption. You've got sort of a listening device into the residential market, now the commercial market as well. You're dealing a lot with younger, Gen Ys, sort of inner city, upwardly mobile people, and Gen Xers as well to a certain extent, and then also the premium market. How do you see tech, things like big data, the impending Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles? Are you factoring these things into your business and your thinking now? What does the decade of urban disruption mean to you?
Yeah, yes and no. I try not to get too involved in all the fluff and talk about it, to be honest. We really try and focus on the fundamentals of delivering really good property. That's a key thing. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there now, augmented reality and blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's going to be as big as what people think. I think the biggest change is CGIs and videos. I think, the big thing that's happening in the market right now is we are fundamentally changing from just an investment market to an own-occupier market. And the only reason that's happened, not for any other reason but price point. So, you've got Melbourne now sitting at 800,000, Sydney at 1.2, Brisbane at 655,000 median house price. However, realistically, you look at the median house prices of where apartments are going, South Brisbane, Fortitude Valley, Newstead, Tenerife, they're 1.2, 1.5, 2.5 in Tenerife. So what's happened is people have just, first home buyers, second home buyers and third home buyers cannot afford to buy houses. It's just not a discussion anymore. The dream of quarter acre block, it is going to die. That's going to happen. And, people, it's really interesting. I chatted Keck the other day, Scott Keck said to me, when my grandfather came here, he had 100 acres. My father had 20 acres. I've got an acre. My son will probably have a terrace. That's what's happening. That's just the reality. In Japan, there's 16 square metres. It's going to happen. But what that's meant is now that owner-occupiers are a real buyer for apartments, developers have a really good opportunity to create great product. And when you're selling just an investment property on a yield and cash flow, which I have no interest in doing at all, it just is incredibly boring, then you don't need pretty pictures. But at the same time, if I'm trying to say to you, Adam, we're doing something really, really different to the guys down the road, that's what everyone says. So I need to be able to show you. So all my projects will do 45 to 50 renders, which is a big investment, and we'll usually do a very good video that will show every single element. Every one of my projects, whether it's 14 apartments or 300 apartments, we build a display suite so you can touch and feel everything. And I think in terms of disruption, I think the biggest thing is that change in demographic as the market changes to actually wanting to understand the product. Buyers are so much more aware now. In the old days, buyers didn't know what rate per metre was. We work on rate, that's our whole livelihood, and now they do. They come in and they say, 10 grand a metre is too much. It should be, 9.5 or whatever it is. And I think that's the biggest disruptor. I think conversations around smart homes and all that sort of stuff, it's a really nice conversation to have, and it's I'm about to launch a project in Hawkesburn where we've got 22 apartments. They'll start at $4.5 million and they'll go to $10 million. Now, you can talk about it there and it's real. We'll do home automation there, probably 50, 60 grand per unit. However, in a project like FE or Cambridge Street or anything 50, 60 apartments, you say to a first home buyer, I'm going to give you home automation, it's going to cost you $20,000, they're going to start earning the money. So it's not attainable yet, it's not affordable yet. Conveyancing is going to change a lot. I think very soon there won't be contracts of sale, there certainly won't be individuals turning up to settlement. That needs to change. I mean, we're settling 650 apartments and we physically have to get each lawyer there, which is just such a crazy concept. So I think things are going to change, but I think it's more about buyer perception and buyer wants and needs than anything.
And buyer empowerment. So we're sort of pressed for time. We'll go through a few of the things that influence you. From the perspective of Gurner, the business, brand's really important from you. You can tell that. What's informing that? What do you look to influence how you develop your brand and how buyers perceive your business and your product?
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. I think the other big disruptor in the market too is that the days of 200 apartments in Fortitude Valley or 200 apartments in South Brisbane just sell is gone. I think there's some really, really good brands establishing now. You got Ari up here, Cavcorp, Point Corp. There's a lot of good developers up here. There's Fridman's talking tomorrow. It's a good mate of mine. Fridman was probably the one who started it, to be honest. Paul's 6-7 years older than me. He's a good mate of mine, and he was a big influencer for me. He loves it when I say that. If he was sitting next to me, he'd be so happy. But he was the first one who said, okay, brand's important. We're going to market this properly. We're going to spend more money and we're going to make less money, but we're going to get buyers to buy again. So for me, it's like Mirvac in the early 2000s. It didn't matter where their product was. People just bought it. People lined up to buy a Mirvac property. We're trying to get people to buy a Gurner property, irrelevant of where it is, which means that I have to be very strict on where we buy. So it's got to be in those specific locations. So brand's a massive thing. And also I love it. That's it's a passion. Correct.
Yeah. Yep. What motivates you personally?
It's a good question. It's drive and passion. We're not trying to be the biggest or the best at all. We've got lots and lots and lots of opportunities every day. I have to absolutely love a site to go ahead with it. So it's all about passion. As I said earlier, what we do is brutally hard. It hurts a lot and it's exhausting. I don't have a social life outside of work at all. So I've got to love it. So it's got to be great design, it's got to be great brand, it's got to be great product, and I've got to be really proud when I walk through and finishing projects like Brizzy where I had thousands of people tell me I was an idiot and front page of the paper telling me I'm an idiot, and to walk through that now and to be able to stick it all up them and say how great is this is really great.
I'm sure it is. Where do you turn for sort of inspiration around sort of what's going on in the world? Books, podcasts. I mean, what are you following? Do you read Mori's Saturday paper?
Mori's way too hardcore for me. That's too black. It's a bit too hardcore for me. You'll laugh. I actually used to read a lot of Trump's books, although he's a bit of a dickhead right now. He's written some great books on property and his deals, describing how deals work. But no, look, my inspiration is definitely New York and London. New York by a very long way. Although FV was much more a sort of an Asian-style hotel concept, most of my product is either Upper East Side New York concept, which is Albert Place, or Meatpackers. So Meatpackers is a huge influencer. London as well. These are markets. What people don't understand is how ridiculously immature our market is. Brisbane, 2.9% of your dwellings are apartments versus houses. Melbourne, 3.6%. Sydney, 9%. Vancouver, sort of typical comparables are about 30%. New York, London's about 80, 90%. So we are ridiculously immature. So I see a really exciting period ahead. And, all these people saying the market's going to crash. Well, you've been saying that for 15 years, and I reckon the fundamentals right now are better than they've ever been, without any doubt. I should note that I think Brisbane needed to stop when it did. Brisbane got too hot, and I remember when Graham Quirk first came and saw me, I said, look, you bring planning on pretty quickly. Are you worried about the market? He said, no, not at all. The market dictates what the market wants. And he's 100% right. It took off, and it really took off pretty quickly, and it didn't slow, it stopped. Yeah. And I think the big thing up here at the moment is construction prices too. And, talking about challenges, our third tower up here almost killed me last year. We had a $45 million blowout in construction prices, and I've never, ever, ever in my life got a construction price wrong. And that was...
Explains a few of the greys there.
Lots of greys up there, yeah. Look, it was really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
We had ANZ there that were approved, and I had to go to them, ask them to wait 12 months. This is when ANZ said they were out of Queensland 3 months before I asked them to wait. We had a bill price, you know, I'd allowed a 15% escalation on stage one, which was to 57 million. The tenders came in, I remember today very distinctly. The first one was 92. I'm like, oh, they fucked it up, thank God. Second one, 96. Third one, 104. So it was definitely the biggest challenge of my life, and literally took us 12 months, 7 days a week, redesigning, reworking, pushing. You know, we'd already sold out, so we couldn't move revenues much. And we got there, thank God.
So we're going to play a quick game just before we wrap up. It's called short long. So you can only answer short, which implies a negative, or long, which implies a positive. Brisbane apartment market in the next 3 years.
Long.
Melbourne apartment market in the next year.
Definitely long.
The Australian economy in the next 2 years.
Super long. Am I allowed to say that?
You can say that. Blockchain's impact on the property sector in the next 10 years.
Irrelevant.
Interesting. Chinese investor demand in the next 18 months in Australia.
Very short.
Very short.
Yep.
The North Korean missile crisis and its impact on Australia's real estate market.
Very real and short.
Automation and its downward impact on construction costs.
Downward impact.
Yeah.
Are they coming down? No one told me that.
Will automation reduce construction costs?
No chance.
Tim, thanks, mate. Appreciate the honesty. Appreciate your time. Would you please thank Tim Gurner?